Hello, this is Black Country Blokes chewing the fat.
Listen.
I've been hearing a lot lately about men don't talk, but in my experience, men do talk, just people aren't listening. So it's going to be me and a group of blokes discussing our struggles and victories through life. Warning, there may be some bad language, so apologies to all the moms, especially my own. Let's get going.
Listen.
It's the Black Country Blokes chewing the fat with me, Kev Dillon, Lee Cadman, Aaron Chew. And our special guest tonight is Shaun Griffiths. Now, Shaun Griffiths has worked within the mental health industry for numerous years now, and he's played at a very high level of rugby at DK. So, saying hello to everyone from DK. So, Shaun, said me wittering on, tell us how you got into it first.
First of all, it's getting back a few years now. 16 years ago, I suppose I owe a lot of credit to my sister. She was working in learning disability at the time and said to me, have you ever considered, because I didn't know what I wanted to do in my life, have you ever considered mental health? So I went applied at uni, got onto the course, and then pretty much straight from the first placement I did, I just thought to myself, this is definitely something I wanted to do. I didn't want to spend my life sitting in an office and not really making a difference. I wanted to make a difference with my job. So once I started doing it, I fell in love with it and then just went from there, really. Started off as a staff nurse on a ward, a psychiatric intensive care unit, where you have like kind of patients that are quite high risk or high needs. And that's where I started when I first finished my training and did, I think it was about 6 years on that ward, and then moved on to working in a scheme called the Street Triage scheme, which started in Birmingham, and that's going out with police and ambulance, and then you go and assess people in their homes on the street, and then try and do basically like taking urgent care to them to try and help them with their mental health problems, and then see where we can signpost people from there. And then after that, I did what I'm doing now, which is bed management.
But I bet in the 16 years, has there been a massive change?
Huge change. There's been a lot of positives, I think, around mental health.
And that's good to hear, because we don't hear that as well. Of course.
I think it's the awareness and like people doing things like you guys, people actually talking about mental health. It's changed a lot. When I first got into mental health, it was a bit of a taboo subject, really. People didn't really talk about anything, in particular men. You just kind of, you didn't have as much contact with males until it got so bad that they ended up in hospital and stuff like that. So I think that's changed a lot, and awareness has changed a lot. I mean, when I first started in mental health, my friends would ask me, like, what do you actually do?
Mm-hmm.
You know,
especially rugby players.
Yeah, definitely. And, it was, the understanding wasn't really there, but over the years, you've seen people a lot more comfortable about talking about things, about addressing their issues and seeking help, which is the biggest thing, that you see that people don't wait until it's, got really bad before they seek help. And I think that's one of the biggest positive changes. And I mean, obviously, everything's not always plain sailing, and in the NHS as a whole, it's underfunded. And I've seen that over years, just funding cuts.
Mental health is really underfunded, though, isn't it? I've looked at some stats today. I can't remember them now, but I was looking and thinking, compared to the rest of the funding that the NHS gets as a whole, mental health is right down there at the bottom, isn't it? In top funding,
it's really sad, because like the specialist help that some people need, it's really difficult for them to get, and really what we really need to invest in is care in the community and helping people so that they don't get to the stage where they need to go into hospital. So we need more support in the community, so people can they don't end up going into hospital and then come into contact with guys like me in hospitals, but that we can outreach more and provide more support so people can function better in the community. And
In long term, that should save cost as well, isn't it? Because I'd have thought it costs more to have someone in that hospital bed than it would for someone like you to go around and be in the community treated.
yeah, massively. It's such a high cost, and there's been, there's no secret, it's been all over the press. There's such a shortage of mental health beds that inevitably the NHS is struggling, and then when we don't have enough beds in the NHS, they outsource to private providers who charge an absolute fortune. And I mean, there's private providers building new hospitals all the time. So
there's also a strain on police, isn't there, because of that? Because I've seen that some people who should be in those hospital settings are actually in police cells because they don't have that bed. And I suppose it comes down to a bit of police training that's pointing those people in the right direction.
yeah, I mean, that's changed a lot as well, especially around here and around Birmingham area as well, where it's the knowledge of police officers now is so much better than when I first started in street triage in 2014. It was the knowledge. They were concerned as well because they're dealing with people and they don't really understand how to deal with them at that point. And then with the scheme that I was involved in, it not only did we work with them, but we also did like training and went to offices and stuff. And they've got a lot of schemes now, particularly in West Midlands Police, where they've looked at the training of officers and helped them to get the understanding and provided them with contacts so they can speak to the mental health professionals and other officers that have had more training so they can get the help to people at the right time.
Yeah.
What was the TV show you were on? And you popped up. Well, I'm pretty sure that is.
Yeah, that was on ambulance. Yeah, that's yeah.
But it's like when we were seeing it, it was people who were ODing in the street, overdosing, and you're going over and giving them that injection to revive them.
Yeah, well, it was. I wasn't giving any injections, by the way.
No,
the paramedic.
No, yeah, the paramedic.
But yeah, it's a huge problem. I mean, it's changed over the years. Just different drugs come along, and then this, and at the moment, like, it's a huge problem with Mamba and Spice and stuff. And you get so many people that are taking these drugs, and then they end up in hospital. And sometimes these guys are like 3-4 days in hospital, and that's it, and then they're fine because they just have like a drug-induced psychosis, recover really quickly, and then they're fine again. But it's because it's so. I mean, like a lot of the drugs that have been around for years, it's kind of they're not as like synthetic as the drugs that they're now, and it's so many different strands, and it's like they'll change one little thing and then they call it a different name, and then all this. And I mean, there was a huge problem going back a few years when there was these legal highs that they then be made legal. That was a huge problem because people could just go in the shop and buy them.
Yeah.
And then they'd make one illegal and then they'd just change a strand of one chemical in it, and then it was legal again. So that was a good thing making them all illegal, but it's still a huge problem. And you see them in city centres and they're just like spread out one after another. Just past out.
So what's your view on that? Do you think drugs should be made legal
But
to
safer.
help, but safe to help the problem? So you have a selected place where you buy them and they're regulated.
I think that there's a place for that, and I think when we have so many illegal drugs, it's so difficult to regulate it, and so many people are changing little things and doing things to them, and it's.
You think the market would still be there for illegal
I think
drugs?
that, I think even if you legalise one or two, say if you legalise cannabis or you legalise this or that, there's always going to be other things that people go out and say, well, I'll do this because then I can sell it cheaper, it's not regulated.
Yeah.
So I think there's always going to be an issue there. And I mean, they have a big issue in the prisons as well with Mamba and Spice and stuff, because some of them don't show up on urine tests either, so it's like they have huge problems in prisons and stuff. And then also the NHS struggles with that as well, because when someone has ODs on them, going to hospital because there's so little about them. They can't give them. There isn't any medication to give them. They're just literally just sitting there waiting for them to kind of come down.
It all to take right.
Yeah.
Isn't it mad though? Like the man-made stuff have been more dangerous than the cannabis, the opiums, the stuff. If they were regulated better, and you had to get your whatever on prescription, had to go in and say I've got psychosis, however, so you don't have skunk, you have resin or whatever is, and get it suitable to you. But instead it goes on you buy from a car park, you don't know what's in it, and that's when the problems can happen.
Yeah, it's just a difficult subject, and it's difficult
Yeah,
area. It's like, I mean, in America, certain states in America legalise certain drugs, and cannabis is legal in some states, but they still have huge problems, and have huge problems with crystal meth and stuff like that. And I mean, that's when you see someone on that. When I was working on the street triage, it's just I've never seen anyone just so elated, just like sweating and drinking bottle after bottle of water, litres of water, and it's scary. And you just think, what can we do better? What can we do better for people? I mean, sometimes these guys, or these people that are having these drugs, are kind of, as I said, end up sectioning in hospital, and they're only there like 4 days, 5 days, and it's out the system, and then they're fine again. And you're just like, how can we better? There must be a better way of doing it, so the resources aren't used up for it. And then that person could be in hospital, and then someone that really needs that bed can't get a bed.
Do you think with a lot of people who are taking that kind of drug, there's an underlying mental health problem, which is why they're taking that drug, or do you think it's just actually it's the new thing to do and people are just doing it? I
think it's a bit of both. I think there is some, undoubtedly, people that have mental health issues that take drugs to self-medicate. There's quite a lot that do. But then there's others that, when you see them and they're fine, and then they take, especially like this Mamba and Spice, and they're just absolutely all over the show. And then next thing, they're fine again. You think, there doesn't seem to be anything underlying there, but you do get some. And especially there's like research around cannabis and the use and THC and how that affects psychosis and stuff. And there's some people can smoke cannabis and be fine, and then another person can smoke cannabis and they're psychotic. Yeah. So it's just knowing that maybe I'm that kind of person that can't do that.
Some people can't drink whiskey. It's that same. To different extremes.
Yeah, it's just, actually, it's not the best thing for me. This is what happens when I do smoke weed. Then
it's a shame that's the case as well with things like cannabis, because it can also be very beneficial for the NHS. It does help a lot of volume. My daughter's on cannabis subscribed through the NHS Epidiolex, but it's not readily available. You have to be in a certain bracket to get that drug, but it's helped her immensely. Really has.
I've never seen anything like it. You see, like the people that have seizures after seizure after seizure back to back, and then the start and the cannabis oil and stuff, and they're just like nothing.
That's exactly the case with my daughter. She doesn't have nothing, to be fair. She doesn't. She still has daily seizures, but she was having hundreds a day, and now she's down to probably 10 a day, maybe less some days, more some others. So it really has had a positive effect, and it's a shame that because we can't quite get it regulated properly yet, we don't know. It's not quite where it should be and being used how it should be. Because again, the cannabis oil she has no THC in it. Now I know in America, in some states, it's legal to have THC in the oil, which then helps again. Now there's not high levels of THC in it, but there is enough in there that really can help break the seizures even more.
What's THC?
It's basically the part of the cannabis that gets you high.
Right. Okay.
So with the cannabis oil now, they're able to take that away. So you're still getting benefit,
right,
but it's not the full benefit of the cannabis oil.
Look, with cannabis, because now there's so many people growing it themselves, and Have you seen a massive influx with youngsters because of smoking super skunk and sniffing dodgy Charlie?
I think like you did when I was working on like the wards and stuff. You did used to see quite a bit, and you would see some people, and there was a lot of different strains. But it was kind of before people started with Mamba and Spice and stuff like that. So it kind of you did used to have with people. A lot of people used to come through with the ward and stuff that had been smoking like skunk and stuff like that. And you did get some. So I remember there's one guy that I nursed, and he'd been smoking with for like 10 years, never had a problem at all. And then he moved and went to a different guy, bought some different, it was skunk. And the next thing you know, he was on the ward and he was really psychotic. And I remember when he was well again, he said he'd never smoke weed again. And he didn't. And I don't know if he didn't, but I never saw him come back. So it can be that just sometimes you have something that's different, there's a different strain or stronger, and then it reacts differently. But I mean, I think that it can contribute to it more. But there are some people that are susceptible to it, just like some people that will become psychotic or have mental problems through stress, that they can become stressed and they can become really unwell. So they have to work on the stress, just like someone who may smoke weed, they become well. So probably shouldn't smoke weed. There's so many different triggers with mental health, and I think that's the thing. It's like sometimes people think, well, it's like if I've got a broken leg, I'll get a cast. If I've got a headache, I'll take some paracetamol. Mental health's so much more complex. It's like one person that's got psychosis can suddenly let's do another one. You can give them the same drugs. And it could work for one so well that out of hospital and fine to lead their life no problem, and then the same medication would do nothing for the other person. So it's just about there's so many different antipsychotics out there, antidepressants. It's all about getting the right dose, getting the right medication, and also with talking therapies as well, and getting psychology and things like that. So it's so complex that I mean. You do get like loads of people that come and say, "Oh, what's my diagnosis? What's my diagnosis?" And it's like sometimes it's not. I don't find the mental health diagnosis that helpful because you have so many complex symptoms. You might have one person that's got a lot of mood disorder issues and psychosis and lots of other things. You're kind of treating those symptoms one by one as opposed to just being going right. That diagnosis, you fit into that box and we'll give you that same medication every time. It's about making sure you get the right thing for people. So it's more about treating the kind of symptoms as opposed to a diagnosis.
So if you have someone if someone's watching this and their loved one is, if they're worried about psychosis, what kind of things would you say to look out for?
Just, I mean, on the lower level of things, just like kind of, you can have so many, that's the thing with psychosis, so many different symptoms. You've got like positive and negative symptoms, and like something as simple as just not wanting to get out of bed. The same as like when someone's depressed, can be that kind of similar. Negative symptoms is you get someone that just stays in bed, doesn't want to get out of bed, doesn't really like lethargic, doesn't want to do anything, and then you can get other positive symptoms where you talk about like kind of paranoia and voices and that kind of thing, but that's more when you see someone getting more and more unwell, then they may start reacting on those, but they may just like seem distracted. It's another thing, like, because if you think, if you're trying to concentrate on something and you're constantly hearing someone talking, then you kind of, that's it, you can struggle to be able to focus on anything. So that's like one of the major things when people think about psychosis, they do think, well, it's about voices and paranoia and stuff like that, but there's so many different symptoms that some people don't have, that they don't hear voices, but they may be like really paranoid, really suspicious that other people are following them and stuff like that. But I mean, just I won't say like individual things to look at, but just look for changes in people. You know, it's, I think with all mental health, it's if you notice that someone's not, you know, you think, oh, something not quite right with Kev, you know, I think something different about him today. Just ask them what's going on, you know, just what's happening. Because the more people talk about it, the more we're gonna, you know, find out. And I mean, I've had friends and colleagues over the years that like kept things in for so long and didn't really speak about it and didn't really say anything. And they could have always come to me and said, well, you know, I'm just a bit worried about this and this is happening with me. And it's just about that kind of, when you see things are different with someone, just saying, are you all right? Is there any, do you need to chat about anything?
Because that's what I want you to talk about. Because like when women have had babies and then they have the postnatal, and then we have these different things, and we always think, oh, my children are going to be taken away from me, I'm going to go and get sectioned. But that is the very, very, very last resort, isn't it? A lot of times.
Yeah, it is massive. And there's so, everything in mental health is about least restrictive. And that's it's everything we talk about is getting people the help in the least restrictive environment. So that every time we want people to stay at home, we want people to be with their loved ones. We don't want to take people into hospital. It's the last resort. And people will only get sectioned if they're a significant risk to themselves or others, or they have a significant level of illness that they're saying this cannot be treated in the community. So it's not something, and if you've got insight, and some people do have great levels of insight that they know there's something wrong, so they can say, do you think you need to come into hospital? Do you think you need some support in hospital? And the majority of the time people will say yes. It's only when people have gone past that when they don't realise, that's when it becomes very difficult. But it's always the very last option. And people, just because, like you're saying about kids, people get sectioned, you're not going to lose your kids or anything like that. It's about getting people treatment and getting people well and getting them back to the loved ones. It's not about taking the children around or away from them or kicking them out of the house or anything like that. It's about helping people. And it may not seem to like that to some people at the time because they're so unwell, they're like, people just dragging me off and taking me to hospital, but it's always to help people. It's never about punishment or dragging people off. It's always just to try and help. And sometimes,
whatever the amount of times, you can live with these things, can't you? You can live with depression, you can live with anxiety, you can live with these. And so hopefully if you get the right medication early enough and you stick to the medication, then you can still have a fulfilled life.
Definitely. It's about finding what works, and it's not always, like I say, it may be medication, it may be counselling, it may be psychology, there's a lot of different treatments and interventions that people can have that can be delivered in the community that don't need to be, it's not about, you don't have to go into hospital for a lot of things, and it's about getting the right support around people. Whether that be family, whether that be carers, stuff like that. That's what it's all about, getting all that, the right support and the right treatment so people can carry on with their life and carry on with everything that they would normally do or want to do.
So if you need that, Sarah and Lady.
Yeah, I was just going to ask in relation to, obviously you said there's a big spectrum and you'd almost have to individually see somebody to recognise what kind of help they need. Would you recommend something that maybe you could just do across the whole board that would just benefit people on a daily basis that's open to all of us, i.e. through the community, such as journaling, speaking? We always speak on this show about the importance of talking. That's not always as easy as it sounds. All four of us here will listen to anyone listening to this and, we'll sit with them for as long as we need, but we still have people close to us who probably still won't reach out to us. But are there any tips for maybe somebody listening now that they can just maybe implement it on a daily basis? It could be as simple as exercise, nutrition, or something that you think will just help people.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, exercise, and I've always found exercise helps with the kind of how you feel about things and how. But that's obviously on an individual level. But exercise and eating well, getting about, make sure like having some kind of structure
Mhm.
to your life and stuff like that, and having things that you work towards as well. I mean, it can be difficult when you like kind of do start feeling down and stuff like that to be able to focus on things. But I would always recommend like people have kind of things they can look forward to, things that they're doing they can focus on and concentrate on.
Yeah.
And like you said, talking and having that kind of support around you as much as you can, not pushing people away, and building kind of relationships where you feel comfortable that you can speak to people. And I think people do worry about what others are going to think, what everyone's going to think, and well, I don't really want to say it to so and so because I might think I'm a bit of a wuss or something like that. It's not about that. I think 9 times out of 10, if you actually spoke to them, they'd be like, okay, well, how can I help you?
Of course. Yeah. And I think sometimes when somebody says something, you're thinking, well, I felt the same as well.
Yeah.
And you almost feel relieved that another person, not in a horrible way, but has felt that kind of insecurity or that vulnerability or that pain that you've been feeling.
I think if you speak to 99% of people, if you speak to them, they'll have had periods in their life where they don't feel 100%, where they're feeling depressed or worried about things, stressed about things, anxious. I would say 99% of people, just that some people just don't want to talk about it. And I don't want to say, and they see it as sign of weakness. So especially like I said, when you're in environments where you're like playing rugby or you're working in a factory and stuff like that, and it can be sometimes a bit of a macho environment where it's like, oh well, if I speak to so and so, you might think that I'm not as hard as I thought, but really, it's not a sign of weakness to admit that sometimes we struggle with things, and I've had parts of my life where I thought down about things, no reason why. Just you think to yourself sometimes, you think, oh well, I should be happy.
Of course, yeah.
I should be happy about this.
And the guilt
perfect.
comes in then, doesn't it? You think,
Yeah.
well, why am I feeling bad when I've got 2 beautiful children, a wife, and
we're
humans?
Yeah, everyone's human, and there's obviously sometimes you just feel down, and it's about being able to talk to people, and you'd be surprised that the amount of people that want to help, and would be mortified of their friend or their brother or their son feeling like that and not knowing and not being able to, help them.
Of course.
I think that, like, with the fear of maybe coming into a second lockdown and all these, I think as human beings, we do like to pop and see someone and be together. And I think with the first thing I say with mental health is don't isolate yourself, stick to a routine. But it's so hard when you're stuck in a house or a flat or whatever, you can't necessarily see your loved ones. And I think that's when the loneliness can easily turn into the depressions and the paranoia. And so I think that with all the uncertainties at the moment and what we've had all this year, really, I think have you seen a spike in that?
Yeah, we kind of we've had ups and downs with mental health, and we kind of had a period where people were like had been isolating themselves, and you had kind of people that might have underlying mental health diseases already, hadn't been taking the medication, were worried about going to the pharmacy to get the meds, so they stayed at home, and then they kind of become more unwell, and then when they do come out, they're like really unwell. So we did have a few of those. We had a few people really paranoid about COVID itself, and just like really paranoid about getting it and not wanting to go out. Or like one guy he was sleeping in his car. He's been sleeping in his car for 3 days on Tesco car park because he was worried about getting it. And we did have bits like that, and then you've got the kind of, once people have been able to go out a bit more, it becomes more, you see more people. So maybe the people that became unwell when they've been locked down, they're actually coming into view, and then you kind of, but there's been definitely a spike in people being really unwell. Whereas I think usually you can kind of catch people earlier that have underlying mental health issues and relapse. You can kind of catch them earlier because you're seeing them all the time. But when you're not seeing people, you don't see those early
Yeah.
warning signs to be able to get help sooner. So it becomes a bit more, you get a bit further down the line and they become a bit more unwell. But like you said about people isolating themselves, especially people that live on their own and haven't got that kind of family that they live with and their support network, they've only been able to talk to on the phone. But I mean, we're kind of lucky that we've got technology like we have now. I mean, that you can pick up your phone and you can FaceTime someone and stuff like that, and that's important to me. I mean, it's not as good, like it's not the same as sitting there and speaking to someone and having a coffee or going down the pub with someone. But sometimes you have to kind of work with things, work with what you've got. I know me and my friends stayed in contact with having video chats and stuff like that, and it's good because you can still sometimes. It's just good just to talk a bit of rubbish.
Every Saturday we did a quiz with your brother, and it was good old friends, just having a crappy little quiz, but having a little pass, we were all having a drink, and it was nice because back if you'd have been in the 80s or 90s, you'd have had one house phone in the middle of the living room, wouldn't you? It cost you a fortune.
Me and my friends is similar. Just had a drink and got the iPad and was just having a chat and. Like you would normally, so it's important to be able to, or else you can slip into isolating yourself, and obviously if you're stuck in four walls with the same people, not speaking to anyone, then you can easily get irritated with people.
One of my good friends who suffers mental health though, because he's not comfortable talking on the phone, and when he was having his appointments, he had got to go to the depot and see people, so. Then people were phoning him and he was getting paranoid. So, but we used to phone each other every other day because he felt safe talking to me. And he'd say, Kev, I'm having a wobble today, or Kev, I'm feeling good today. But every day I'd phone him up. And if he didn't answer, I'd spend the rest of the day worrying. Then he'd phone me back up, or he'd drop me a text saying, Kev, I'm not in a good place today. I'm not suicidal, but I'm just having a good day. And I'd always just send him back saying, when you're ready. But I think that's what we've got to do is, especially with them people, and sometimes the class clown, isn't he? He was bulletproof and he's laughing, but really he's going home and having a belly full on his sofa. So we've just got to reach out to people. And if you do think they're having a wobble, really, I don't know, just even if you just send them a text and saying, I'm here when you need to talk.
I think you do that really well. You did that really well over lockdown, and I think that's something for anyone watching as well. Is we always say, look, four of us here now, we're happy to speak to anyone, and we say this every single week. But when you're in that funky place, and I call it like a funk where you're just feeling low. You don't want to speak to no one. You don't want to reach out. So therefore, maybe we take it as a community that when we're having the good days to then reach out to those people and just a simple text, are you okay? And then instantly you can tell. I mean, I can always tell with my nearest and dearest from their response, just from a text, are they in a good place? Like, for example, like my mom or someone, I'll know instantly. And then from there, you can obviously then make an effort because that person then is probably struggling. And I think you used to do that really well, because I know with myself, I don't necessarily go into like really, really low moods, but I do have days where I don't want to speak to no one. And I wake up and I don't know why, because like everything could have gone amazing, could be like the greatest day ever. But I wake up feeling like in a funk, and I stop doing the things that I do every day, like working out, drinking, hydrating, like the stuff that sets me for my day, like journaling and stuff. And then you'd always make sure and you text and then you ring. And that's something I've started to take on now. So back in the day, you're weak if you do this, but I'll text my friends and say, I'm thinking about you. Are you all right? Or I appreciate you, or something just nice, just to maybe if they are ever feeling low, for them to maybe just kind of feel a bit happier or feel at least capable of reaching out. That makes sense.
And clock the response, because if it's like Aaron texts me and I go, I'm saying, bro, good day. Or if it's just that thumbs up, how come he hasn't got the time to just say, either a voice note, oh, I'm fine, thank you, bro. To clock the response, and if the response all of a sudden suddenly changes, why has it changed?
Like I say, it's just knowing someone and seeing those things, seeing those little changes in people that you think maybe something isn't quite right. Maybe they do need a chat, or they do need some support or some help, or just someone, just to listen sometimes.
And if someone has got problems, Shaun, what should they do? Should they go to the GP, or what would you recommend?
I would definitely recommend going to the GP, because it's always they're kind of like the gatekeepers to all health really. As a first point of call, I mean, I would go there. I mean, if you get anyone that's like having issues and they need some direction of where to go, then contact you. Always contact me, and I can recommend around this area or around like kind of Birmingham, Coventry and stuff like that. I've worked with a few trusts and have links in other trusts as well, so I can always say, well, this is where you need to go to be able to get access. Because I mean, like sometimes you can go to the GP and they can point you in the direction of counselling and stuff like that, and you can access counselling as well yourself privately if you want to do it that way. But they have got kind of like the routes in for assessment, so that kind of you can be assessed straight away, and then they can signpost people into the right area as well, where they can get the right support.
And how about if I saw some signs in Kev, like who would I go to at that point if I saw signs in other people? Because it wouldn't be your GP. Well, I wouldn't know Kev's GP for starters.
Yeah. I mean, it's that's where your relationship comes in.
Yeah.
And it's about the kind of talking to and saying, right, well, maybe it's like, I'll come with you.
Okay.
Do you want me to come with you to your GP, or there's services that you can self-refer to as well.
Okay.
There's a service called Healthy Minds, which is a good service that you can self-refer into. There's Healthy Minds in different areas that you can kind of. They've got a really good website, and some of the areas you have to phone up. I think some you can do an online referral, and they kind of will be able to say, right, well, this is the kind of. They'll send you an appointment, or they might speak to you over the phone to triage you first and speak to them on the phone. So they're always a good service, but I would say the GP is always good because they can point you in that direction.
I suppose they have a few different avenues that you can go with a GP as well. It won't just be.
Do you remember the name of the one that Marcus used to say? I can't remember it. Do you remember it? No, I can't remember it.
You put me under pressure now.
Yeah.
But I mean, it is about that, like trying to say, well, this is where I think you should be going.
Yeah.
There might not be.
Was it IAP? Sorry to interrupt. Was it IAP?
IAP's the
IAPS.
people he works.
Was that something
for,
else?
isn't it?
Okay, sorry, Sean.
Yeah, IAPS is a service as well. That's, you can access those through the GP as well. But it's just about. I mean, if it's lower level stuff, then it's about supporting someone to do it. But if they're saying no, I'm not going to do anything. It's when it becomes more difficult.
I think that'd be a rarity, though. I think if you notice someone and you reach out to them, I think it'd be a rarity that they say, actually, no, I'm not. I'm not doing anything. I think you offered to do that. I think a lot of people would want to help. They want to get help, don't they? I don't think there's many people with mental health issues who don't. If you've reached out,
and I think sometimes you're aware of it, but it's a stigma you think. But I think it's like a cut. I have a cut. Sooner I can get that seen to, the better. If I leave it and it's open, then it might get poorly. So the sooner we can get onto stuff, the better. And don't feel like you failed because you've been poorly. You know, you haven't failed if you get cancer. You're not failed if you get the flu. It's just one of them things, and we've got to accept the penicillin to get us better.
Yeah. It's a massive point that, and anyone that's got mental health issues is not. It's not a failure. It's not a reflection on you as a person. So I think that's what, in the past, people have thought, especially when you say about men as well. It's like, well, if I say that I'm depressed, then I'm lesser of a man. Which is, I would say, you're more of a man if you can actually talk about the way that things are affecting you and actually seek help. I think that's the most important thing. Is just like being honest about things, and like kind of the more honest you can be, then the better, really.
Well, Shaun, thank you unless there's anything else anyone would like to say. what I'm going to do, I'm going to advertise next week's show. But if you have got any quotes or sayings that's helped you get through life, or any sayings that works within your organisation, I do it every time, mate. I
He
am.
normally does it to us, so I'm glad it's you this
That's
time.
why we have guests on.
what we-
Deflect it.
Next week is our 1 year anniversary. Who'd have thought it'd been 1 year since I was the only common friend between Lee, Craig, and Aaron. And we started off next door, just all talking over a phone. And then we started doing videos downstairs on the settee and by the boxing ring. And now we're here in our studio. So next week, we're going to be going through some of our episodes, talking about all the wonderful guests. And a lot of the guests are hopefully going to come back on. Now the sound quality is better. Now, because of all this, we don't know how we're going to be doing it, whether we're going to internet, but we'll figure it out together, gang. So join us next week for our 1 year anniversary. So Shaun, if you think of anything, any sayings or?
Just like I said before, just look after yourself, look after other people, and just talk.
Okay.
So until we see each other next time, take care of yourselves and each other. Ta-ra a bit.
Listen, listen, listen.
And that's a wrap for another show. But if there are any comments or messages that you would like us to read out for our next podcast, please be in touch. There are also lots of different organisations at the bottom of this page, and hopefully they can help you or someone you care about. Please share this to spread the word. Until we talk next time, ta-ra a bit.